A great introduction on the topic already. And as India's economy expands, I think circularity is increasingly moving from the margins of just sustainability conversations to core industrial strategy, core company strategy, which you would all agree with. And this has also become critical to questions around resource security, waste management, energy efficiency, and resilient supply chains. And large Indian conglomerates, like all of you here, are of course very uniquely positioned to help with this transition, not just for Maharashtra, but for India as well. And these conglomerates are just beyond circular economy practices, right? Because they also shape supply chains, they influence markets, they mobilize finance, and create ecosystems at large scale. So today's discussion, we will explore three broad themes. Why circular economy matters to large businesses today, how conglomerates can shape systems beyond their own operations to suppliers, to vendors and beyond, what the next phase of circular business transformation in Maharashtra and India could look like. I think with 30 minutes on the clock, I will request all of you to keep your comments concise with the large body of work that all of you are doing. I know it can be difficult. I'll be inviting each of you to begin with your first round of interventions on why, from your perspective, do you think has circularity become strategically important within your organization? Ankit, is it okay if we start with you?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I think when it comes to circular economy, there are basically two principles that we rely on. One is what we call material circularity, and the other is business model circularity. So under both the principles, I think we need to understand that there is a very strong environment case, but at the same time, there is a very strong economic case as well, be it in terms of cost saving or be it in terms of, let's say, new opportunities for revenue growth. So across a number of EPR regulations, which are extended producer responsibility regulations that have come in India over the last 3-4 years, let's say for batteries, for e-waste, for plastics, for end-of-life vehicles, for tires, each of them is basically enabling both innovation in the industry on how do you think about these materials, but at the same time also sort of creating entirely new industry ecosystems altogether. So as a company, and I generally would say for all of Indian industry, there are clear opportunities for each of the existing sectors to see how they participate in that. So I'll keep it brief, but yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Diksha, you want to go next?
Yeah, and I think I'll just build on Ankit said it very well. It would therefore be about coming from either a push, which is these regulations, or a pull from customers asking for a higher recycled content or a greener product. So between that push and pull and the need for resource security as the resources become more scarce, that's what is leading to the bigger strides into this whole circular economy space, whether it's in a business model itself, which is for our downstream aluminium company, or the latest smelter which we are putting up on e-waste and copper recycling, first of its kind in India and second of its kind in world, which is coming up in Gujarat, and it's going to be, it's in the process of being constructed and phase-wise commissioning. So that's where I would leave it at.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Abhishek, go ahead.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. So I think part of it was said very eloquently by Mr. Rajesh Agrawal earlier today. And I think I would like to, and when I was preparing for my answer for this one in my head, it was like, it's at multiple levels we can answer this. At a very universal and a global level, I think it's the most natural thing to do. Circularity is the way nature is, and that's the most natural thing to do. So I think that's one. At a more national scale, I think India has done it for the longest time. For thousands of years, we have lived a very circular life, and therefore, I think it makes only more sense for us to push that way forward. At a Tata Group level, I think it's something which is the right thing to do, which we have always believed that we have a role to play as a large conglomerate in the country, and therefore it's our part. Apart from all what Ankit and Deeksha has already said, I think as a conglomerate we also feel that it's part of our duty as a responsible corporate. And finally, at a very personal level, I think that there are 4 or 5 E's that I can think about circularity. The first one is efficiency, and circularity is extremely efficient. The second one is it's economically sound, it's environmentally responsible, it's ecologically correct. And finally, the last one I find, the E which I am personally very, I would say impressed by, is that circularity is extremely elegant. If you look at it, when you make a truly circular product, there's an inbuilt beauty and elegance about it. So I think these are the reasons why it's becoming more and more. And as the world moves more towards the resource scarce world, more people competing for the same set of resources in a more geopolitically refined, confined world, I think this will become the need of the hour.
Thank you. I'm audible. I think after listening to all 3 panelists, I should now give some examples. And your question is why circularity is important today. Actually, in JSW Group, circularity is not important today. It was important when we started our business. So let me give an example. Ankit, you started with business circularity, material circularity, and I will also add product circularity. Let me give 3 examples. On the business circularity, if you look at, we are the largest steel producer in India. We produce steel, but we produce a lot of, we call byproducts. We never call waste. And there is something called slag which comes out when you produce steel, and which used to be waste, and it takes a lot of land. So we created a business, that is JSW Cement, to manage those waste and use those, and created a business model by creating a business. And that becomes one of the low carbon product business in the world. That's on the business level how the circularity is working for us. On the material level, in fact, when you operate integrated steel operations, it's a hugely material consuming process and energy consuming process. So everything which comes out must be reused. On the energy level, if I categorize that in the gas, liquid and solid products that comes out, every energy which comes out, we try to trap and use through different technologies. That's called waste recirculation process or waste gas recirculation process. 40 to 50% of our energy needs actually get met through managing this waste pressure and waste gases coming out of the system. This is the circularity of energy systems itself. Every solid material that comes out of the systems, we use it, whether it is for the construction material, whether it is making the cement, or whether it is making manufactured sand. So currently we are looking at almost 99.9% of our waste being managed byproducts as a byproducts or co-products. So that is where it gives economic value. So circularity is good for business. This is some of the examples I am giving, right? So it is not today being important. Yes, with the volatility of the material, input material increasing because of the geopolitical situation, it is becoming increasingly important now to focus on all these materials to be used in some way or other so that you get economic value and it makes good business sense. So circularity has to be integrated with each of the business processes. Last example let me give you on the material. That is where Ankit pushed me very well because he is my customer. People are looking at circularity of the materials to be inbuilt, like in case of steel, how much recycled steel content you are putting in to make a steel. And that is becoming important from not from the regulatory perspective, but from the customer perspective, which Deeksha talked about. But also it is important that it is coming from the fact that we have to reduce our emissions. So with the net zero commitment increasingly being forced by the regulations and the customers and equally taken by the organizations, this is becoming important. Sure. So 3 examples, circularity is important to make circular business cases, find new opportunity to make business. Circularity is important to manage all the materials that is being produced in the production cycle. and then look at the innovative products that you can make by using circular materials.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I think you've wrapped up that round for us very well. But before I move on to all of you, and because he mentioned both the customer angle and the industry angle for us, I'll just come up with a follow-up question probably. Since you have been doing it for a long time, how difficult is it, or what is the challenge, especially when you're trying to integrate, say, suppliers or vendors into the process, or any other such challenges? And probably I'll come to all of you once he has answered.
I think two challenges at the moment. We need to have an entire supply chain integrity in the process. So in India, if you see, we have a very informal way to manage circularity. So how we can formalize that? And second important thing is the transparency and traceability in the systems, that the material is really going to get recycled back and you are making a new product out of it. I think these are the two challenges. Awareness, I don't see there is any issue, because as Indians, we love to make circularity. I remember in the childhood, the dabbas that you purchase, mother uses to store something else. So nothing, it is in our DNA, our Indian DNA, that we love reusing material as much, which nowadays in English you call refurbishment of the materials. So we do that from a habit. So that's not a challenge. Challenges are now how we can establish, make it structure, bring in transparency and traceability into the system.
Sure. Abhishek, if I can come to you, how can we move this to the wider market and ensure it's investable at scale as well?
So at a very fundamental level, I think circularity is a problem of misplaced incentives. If you look at it, right? Nobody loves to waste. But the problem is that when a particular material reaches a point where the economic value or deriving an economic value out of it becomes difficult, that is when the real problem starts. I think, so from that point of view, I feel that for corporates like us, the way we look at it is, if we can create the right incentives for for the value chain downstream or upstream rather, we can actually move the needle. We can bring about real change, which people have been wanting to do. Again, I think for the longest time we have been trying to convince people that let's do this. But the moment you put an incentive, the incentive could be in the form of a customer requirement that this is what we demand from you. The incentive could be where they're not really clear about how to put a value to something. If you show them the value, then also that's a big way in which you can bring about that behavior change. So I think many of these things, but the first step is to make them aware of their role, that they have a role to play in this, and that we can work on this together. It's a collective problem. It's not one person or a two company problem. It's a multi-company systemic problem which needs to be solved.
Okay, thanks. Deeksha, coming to you, where do you see the biggest leverage?
So I think it varies with geographies. So it is very well shared on what's been happening EU and the EU Circ examples that came about. What makes it, and that was also spoken earlier, what makes India different is that whole paradox of the technology, innovation, and to some extent capital lies with the formal sector, but the material lies with the informal sector. So how do you kind of bring that together in a way that it's win-win? And for that, I guess it's the whole thing of how we say everything builds up with a combination of policy, finance, technology, and in this case, the fourth lever of social upliftment also needs to come in. And that's how we've seen things change. For example, for our, as ABG, we operate now in 40 countries. And where, for example, for beverage can recycling, the numbers are almost 100% in Brazil and Japan. Japan, we put aside as an example. On many things, they do many very differently and culturally very different. But how it comes about that that social understanding, social win-win, that people think that it's now the thing to do, and it's good for me, kind of a thing. And therefore, how that would happen over a period of time for different products. In beverage can, it moved like that. In automotive, where ethics coming from, we started to work with Ford and JLR, so one of the Tata companies, to say, can we close the loop for pre-consumer like that? So post-consumer, we learned from what's been happening in beverage can, and pre-consumer on what we've done with in the automobile sector, whether it's on with Ford and JLR there, or through Alu Mobility, what we are calling, and then entire value chain with what Birla Carbon's been doing with Michelin and Pirelli on how carbon black can be coming back. But when we will try to learn from all of this, in India, it's essentially, and even globally, when you talk about aggregation, is that moat. That, you know, how do you aggregate and form those partnerships to say, whether it's these pre-consumer kind of partnerships or behavior change, and then at that sorting, segregating stage, technology plays a big role. Even at when, as we learn, and you know, just for our Finnish friends here, the plant in Pakhajan that we're coming up with, it's a Finnish technology. We're working with Metso to set up the e-waste smelter there. But at every stage, you need partnership for different this thing, whether it's on collection or optical sorting or the smelting process, and then the demand signal coming from, you know, is Apple wants recycled copper. Is it how much are they ready to go and work with us? And maybe last thing I think, and that's been a, you know, we learn as we go along, that not every material is the same, and not every material should be we should try to recycle at the same time. I think just understanding that which material is ready to be recycled, and if not, then what would make it ready. So treating it not as this whole single thing, but to say each material and each geography needs to be evaluated in a different manner is another important thing. Ankit, to you.
Ankit, I think she raised some very important points apart from partnerships, the sociology of it, the ethics of it. What is it for you? Procurement, innovation, what is it for you?
No, absolutely. So, you know, in a way, just perhaps attempting to sum this up, there are three fundamental challenges.
I have great panelists. They're all rounding up every question, so it's great.
Absolutely. So one is definitely the reverse logistics problem as a whole. So across all types of materials, aggregating it from the ground level and bringing it back is often a challenge. Very simply put, let's say when you manufacture a tire, you have one big factory in India that supplies around the country. But when you have to do the reverse logistics and processing, you can't bring all the waste tire to a central location. So that often becomes a problem. How do you, aggregate it and also process it relatively more locally, geographically? So that fundamentally is a difference in approach for all things recycling. The second problem often is about the economics of every material is very different. While, let's say, the economics for aluminium, steel, etc. work very well, but when it comes to, let's say, plastics, it's a lot more difficult. For some components in battery, it again works very well. So material to material, the economics of whether recycling makes sense or not is very, very different. So you really have to go into the details for each economic value chain, that how do you incentivize it? Who do you incentivize so that the circle works? Very nuanced solutions to that. The third is, again, we are in early days of this ecosystem to some extent in a formal manner. And in an unorganized setting, I think a lot of this has already been working, but in an organized manner, a lot of this is still early years. The EPR regime largely started in this decade. So there, if I were to take very specific examples, you really need the ecosystem people to come together. We did some work, let's say, in the tire ecosystem. Now, we are not responsible for tire recycling, but as a major consumer in that segment, by bringing together the stakeholders, be it the tire companies, be it the recyclers, be it other material suppliers, by initiating a conversation in that ecosystem, it can, move things forward, which is a win-win for many stakeholders together. Similarly, the other area would be end-of-life vehicle recycling. So in a similar capacity, as an automaker, there is a role that you can play. we also have a recycling company. Now you really have to solve the economics, get 3-4 different categories of stakeholders to work together. So the ecosystem level problem solving is really something that stands out in the circular economy ecosystem, and we really need to be ambitious, I think, both as private sector and public sector to solve this.
So I'll again come back to you for the last round of question before we probably move it to the audience, is that both looking short term and long term. If you're looking, say, 12 to 18 months and 5 years hence, what is the one thing that you would hope has changed in your company to kind of move that circular needle a little bit farther?
So two things are changing. One is at the design and, when you're making a new product. So I think historically not enough focus was being given when you were designing a new product. I'll take a very specific example. We talk about battery recycling. So there is a lot you can do after the battery has, let's say, reached end of life, but there is a lot more you can do at the beginning stage itself, in terms of how you design the battery, which enables recycling to be much easier, a second life application to be much easier. Mm-hmm. So I think these are some things which are fundamentally changing now. So let's say when you're building a new building, mm-hmm. there are a lot of things that you can do in terms of design, in terms of the kind of material you're solving for. Mm-hmm. So I think that is something, 2 years back was not as big a conversation, but 2 years forward, I would see that being very much integrated. Okay. I think if you take a long-term view, I think the moment we are able to cross the threshold of the economics working out, all of these will scale. Currently, a lot of debate across the EPR regimes is, do we do 10%, do we do 30%? I think the main point is the moment you cross the threshold that the economics work out, everyone would want to do 100% because it's an economic win. So I think that's the two things to solve for.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me, I think it would also be that how are we defining what circularity for that material means? That, is it about complete valorization of that whole material that we are looking to recycle? And like he spoke about, so if it's the tire, then what happens? So one thing will get solved by the way of design. But second is just to say, for example, if I was to stay with the e-waste recycling and this, and that becoming as a stream for copper and precious metals, to just define saying, it is only about those critical materials or about the precious metals. If we can cover that and talk about saying, let's get all 25 materials out of that printed circuit board. And then, rather than, then we are making smaller loops and will fight for bigger loops. Because then it would be that black mass would be lying somewhere else and we will keep kicking that thing down the road. So I think as we are trying to say that circularity is one very important way for our country to grow, given the learnings that we've had, like in the midst of the situation that we are in right now, we don't have brown for many things. So green is the only way to go. We don't have the browns. And therefore, to go on the greens, let's not create a brown in the green and then say we will become green. And therefore, complete valorization of each of the products by the way of design, by the way of policy push. Don't just say we will take out critical materials or gold from the e-waste. Please take out everything that printed circuit board has to offer. So I would say that.
Fair.
Thank you. And I think building on what both my earlier speakers have said, I think for us, what's aspirational and what we want to do in the next 5 years is possibly look at a more ecosystem play at circularity. Okay, so I want to give one example because electric vehicles is a topical thing these days. When Tata Group looked at it, we now have a company within the group which is sourcing the lithium. We now have a company within the group which is working on creating that lithium into a battery, converting it. We now have companies like Tata Motors who are using that battery and churning out these beautiful electric vehicles. Right. We also now have Tata Power, which is supporting the entire EV charging infrastructure. Because of these, I would say, synergies, it is also allowing us to eliminate potential waste at each and every level. And also closing the loop back, there are companies within the group now which are looking at lithium recycling, right? So therefore, this ecosystem play is something that I'm pretty excited about, that because sustainability, or rather circularity, it's not a band-aid approach. It has to be a holistic yoga type approach where every cell in the body kind of becomes rejuvenates, and I think that's where that is the approach. And the other thing which I would like to add is the thing around business model change. We all talked about material recycling. I think Ankit alluded to it in the very beginning also, that business models also need to change, and therefore the whole concept of product as a service, these are the topics which possibly will also have better outcomes for humanity as a whole, because then building in something called as obsolescence as a part of a product will go away, and companies will have a lot of incentive to design products which are multi-year use, and they will not go bad over a period of time.
Right.
So that's my take on this.
Thank you. Yes.
Should I?
Yeah.
Quickly, Ankit, I am fully convinced that circular business model is profitable. So it makes perfect business case. So I don't think we need to establish business case. Sorry for disagreeing on that point. What we are trying to focus is, there are two things. What is in my control, what is not in my control. When we are building a circular business model, many things possibly will not be in your control. So therefore, we need to think in a life cycle context of the material and focus on the supply chain, which we in India is not very organized. And I think Deeksha talked about the technology, role of technology. I think that is where we are trying to focus at the moment, that how do we bring in the supply chain into the business model, and how do we establish traceability, quality, and then making a good business case, win for everybody.
Right.
And how do we bring the informal sector to a formal sector, and then use this material. That's important, point number one. Point number two, I think there we need to work. I think I see a role of policy very important, because we do not have lot of standards or lot of regulatory practices mandating use of recycled materials or standards for using those. Like in buildings, we generate something called steel slags. This can pretty well used in the buildings and replace the natural materials, but we don't have a standard. We are working on it. So we need more of such kind of standards promoting use of circular economy. I think both the things, once is what I am convinced about the finances. It makes good business sense.
Okay.
You don't need to prove it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Maybe we have time for one or two questions from the audience, if that's okay. Would anyone like to raise their hand? And yeah, can we take one from this gentleman here? Is there a mic, or can they ask? Yeah. Yeah, I think we can hear you, so you could just ask if that's okay with you. I'll just pass. Yeah. We can hear you. No worries.
Couple of questions. Maybe like a comment. Thank you for super interesting one. More like, I think what's important is the communication. Like how we understand what circular economy actually means. Because I think there are a couple of comments on that. The people around the world doesn't really know what it means. But even the businesses don't always know what it means. Like we need to go into concrete actions. I think that's the first point, communication. Second one is a cultural understanding, because like how European people in different European countries understand and how circular economy matters, how different states in India people understand how it matters, because cultural differences are huge in Europe and in India. And the last one, I think really important, like when we talk about circular economy, I think we should talk about equity and humans. How, I mean, everyone is benefiting from this movement, what we are actually building on right now. Thanks.
May I just check if your question is addressed to someone in specific, or?
No, it's more like a comment,
okay.
for everyone.
Okay. Yes. I'll just take her first. So here. Just if you could wait for the...
Hi, esteemed guests. My name is Meenakshi, and I am a co-founder of a sustainability consultancy startup. Just wanted to really great insights, and especially Ms. Deeksha talking about that there should be more information regarding what recycling and everything goes on. What about the frequency of recycling? Because we understand we are using recycling as a very magical word which will solve all of our problems, but plastic, if you see in many scenarios, it cannot be recycled more than 5 times. So shouldn't that be a part of the tool which tells you, like, if you're recycling something, then that should also be telling you how many times it can be recycled for a proper value chain to exist. So I just want to know from the judges, like, what is their opinion on this?
Yeah, you want to take it? I think Deeksha.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. So no, I think it's a fair comment, and in some ways it's got addressed by what all 4 of us spoke about, whether it's the circular design that Ankit spoke about, or what Prabodh spoke about from the perspective of demand nudge or demand pull. And maybe, I'm just going to be a bit of a, promoting what Ankit's been this thing. I was quite impressed when he convened a tire round table and invited different component makers. So I at least understood it as different component makers, and sent 3 of our businesses to go and participate in a tire roundtable thing, which was the carbon black, the wheel, and also the fabric that goes in. I think when we talk about circular design, we convene people, we understand from supply and demand side, it gets taken care of, because eventually it is about making those choices which are enviro-commercially viable, because both have to work. There will be no planet without all these materials, but we will not exist if both don't exist. So I think we need to be aware of that. But Ankit, in case you want to build on that, or anyone else.
Yeah,
Just a quick reaction. The number of recirculation of a material depends on the material and the end applications. So you just cannot define for particular material what should be. So it's a case to case. But the important thing is that every material can be recycled and can find an application. That's the point.
You want to?
Yeah, I'll just maybe add a point to both the comments that were made. So the thing about recycling and circularity is to look at the basic principles. The basic principles, when I talk internally, we don't often use the word circularity. That's not how things work. So you use the principles of use less material. Just start by using less material. That's principle 1. The second principle is use low emission material. Wherever possible, steel, concrete, whatever. The moment you start using low emission material, that's the second principle. The third is use material which is easy to recycle. The more material you use which is easy to recycle, automatically things start working. The fourth is use more quantity of recycled material in what you build. So I think it's more of a principled approach. The moment you start doing all of these things, you will start seeing that, a lot of these problems will get addressed. Whatever all of us are trying to do, the core fundamental principles are these.
And I guess, but I would add number 5 to that, what Prabodh said, that it is from the application perspective. Eventually, it is about, if you're trying to create a barrier and you want a flexible barrier, you will end up using plastic, because aluminium does not do that, and many other this thing don't do that. And therefore, it becomes from, and I would stick by, not everything you should think of. Don't fight that battle if all parts of the value chain are not in place.
I think we thank you so much. We need to end this session. I've already got notes from the organizers here to end this session. So thank you so much, panelists. I think we need to build an entire ecosystem around it and not just isolated initiatives. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Now the mic is on. Yeah. Very nice listening to all you great circular economy visionaries. So thank you very much for coming. I think you will be handed some thank you tokens. And now we will move on to our next session, which will actually be a so-called fireside chat. We'll also redo the stage a bit.